Oh, a microphony.
And a phony at the mic.
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
The Doctor of Discernment is now online.
You know, much like my show, in that it's a local reaction to things that are happening on a federal level.
Dispensing a daily dose of common sense. No prescription required.
Wow, do I have a boatload of stuff for you, from the crazy to the absurd. Let's start getting into it because, I mean, it is bizarro world out there. And I say, if it's obvious to me, it should be obvious to everybody. Oh, wow. Who could have seen this coming?
This is the Fourth Hour with Greg Belfrage.
Hold on to your butts.
Broadcasting from my basement bunker beneath Kello Radio. Welcome to the Fourth Hour. It's always great to be with you. You know, as we were talking on the air this morning about what's going on with Iran and what the United States should do with Iran. And first of all, I want to thank everybody. I received a number of text messages where folks were weighing in. Also, those of you who are on Facebook who are also weighing in regard to that. Really appreciate all of your comments. And I've got to tell you, I found myself kind of in a state of mind here where I am remembering going into Iraq. I'm remembering Operation Desert Storm. And when we first went into Iraq, that was in the 90s. And then we wind up going back in after 9/11, 2003, I think December of 2003, where we had gone in. Saddam Hussein was captured in Iraq, and the country and really toppled the leadership in Iraq at that time. And I'm reflecting on that as we're considering what to do with Iran. And I think primarily because, you know, initially when the United States went into, now this was into Iraq. This is when George H.W. Bush was president, and the United States went into Iraq. Remember Operation Desert Storm and what was going on with that? You had General Norman Schwarzkopf, who was in charge of the U.S. forces, and Operation Desert Storm, where you had Iraq that was, you know, getting into, wasn't it Saudi Arabia, I think at the time, that they were trying to usurp Saudi Arabia and take over, and the United States came in pretty strongly. And we stopped short of the goal. You remember that? George H.W. Bush came in and liberated Saudi Arabia and then stopped short of going in and taking care of the problem in Iraq, which was Saddam Hussein. And so it wasn't then until the 2000s, now we're talking post 9/11, in the time following 9/11, that you had a lot of reflection that was going on as to whether or not we should have completed the job when we were initially there. And there were those, I believe General Schwarzkopf was among them, he wanted to keep going. He wanted to go in, he wanted to remove the threat and end it. And George H.W. Bush said no, the goal, he at that point, the United States was working with other nations. And that was the goal that they had set, was that Saudi Arabia would be freed, right? And so after that, then they felt it was mission accomplished, and they stopped. And then it was George W. Bush who went in and said, following 9/11, you know, we were in Afghanistan, and then we were in Iraq. And then he said, no, we're going to remove Saddam Hussein from power. I have been thinking about that a lot, you know, as we look at what's going on now with Iran and what's happening with Iran. Do you go in and this is what we were talking about this morning. I'm not saying it's really kind of a distasteful situation to be in. I mean, the United States finds itself in this place that's really kind of distasteful. What do you do now with Iran? With Iran. You've got Iran making all kinds of brave noises and making threats. This is something that Iran has done. I've got to tell you, most of my lifetime, I remember when the Shah of Iran fled the country, fled to the, United States offered him safe harbor. And ever since then, Iran fell to extremists, and it's been chaos in that country ever since. It's just been absolute chaos. Now, that's not an argument for necessarily going in. But the reality, I think, is, and these are the questions, I think, as I'm walking you through my conscience here, I think a little bit as I'm trying to weigh what we have seen going on and what's happening, and there are comparisons, I think, between Iran and Iraq. We were in Iraq, and we were right there. And we could have taken Saddam Hussein out. And then we could have gotten out. Because that's what the United States did initially in Iraq. We went in, we maybe it was Kuwait. It wasn't Saudi Arabia, it was Kuwait. Now that I think about it. We liberated Kuwait, and then we got out. So to those, as we talk about this and what we ought to do, and those, because there's a lot of debate about this among people on the right. How far do we go? Do we go into, this is contrary to the MAGA movement? First of all, don't lecture Donald Trump about what the MAGA movement means. He is the MAGA movement. Donald Trump is the MAGA movement. So for people who are saying this is what the MAGA movement, maybe that's what it means to you, but you're not the one who defines it. Like it or not, Donald Trump's the guy who defines the MAGA movement. And the decision really will wind up being his. Now, would I like to be able to say, we're not going to do this, or we don't have to, sometimes events are thrust upon you. And I was making this point on Facebook the other day to someone, World War II, you'll remember America did not want to get into that war. America had this isolationist kind of point of view. And that's what you're seeing in the country right now. The isolationists who are saying, no, you can't involve America. And what happened with World War II? There was a little incident called Pearl Harbor that a lot of people remember. And then what happened? You pissed off the country beyond belief, understandably. Now, I wasn't around at the time, but I certainly understand history, and I understand the reaction to the country, and it was anger. It was anger. You saw United States mobilize, and boom, we were in on this. Which would you rather have? That's the question. If Iran does get a hold of a nuclear weapon and they decide to deploy it, you want to have that kind of anger and that kind of response, or would you rather head it off ahead of time? These are the questions I think a lot of us are asking ourselves. How do you respond to that? I think World War II is a great example why these isolationist points of view simply do not work, because you have other countries that are going to take actions, whether or not you want to engage with them. Sometimes these things are forced on you. Really. So I know there's a lot of concern about China. One of the first text messages I got from someone this morning was we got to keep our eyes on China. No, we've got to keep our eyes on the world. We've got to keep our eyes on the world, because there is as much violence as we see in this country, right? I mean, there's a lot of violent people that we are seeing just in this country. Imagine what that is like throughout the world and the threats that the world might pose. Whether it's China or whether it's, Iran or Russia or, America's enemies are still out there. And I don't think you can deal with just one. That's not the world we live in. You got to be able to deal with these things, I think, at the same time. You got to be able to deal with these situations and these conflicts. Now, again, I'm not advocating any particular action regarding this. I just think that saying no, we by no means can we engage in that. No, we cannot help Israel. That is something. The lack of defense that some people, or the point of view that a number of people have about Israel, I find really disturbing. I have a tough time with that, where they just blow Israel off. They don't see Israel as being of consequence. I'm not one of those people. I don't have that point of view. I grow very, very concerned. I watch the threat against Israelis with a heavy heart. It weighs on me often. Now, again, these are not arguments about necessarily taking up arms and going to war, but I mean, all of these things, I think, are percolating out there, and it's a lot to deal with. I don't envy the president at this moment. So Israel's out there. Israel's attacking Iran. They've already achieved air superiority over Iran and contemplating additional steps. The reality is those bunker busters, only the United States has got them. Israel does not have the bunker buster. That would have to come from the United States. Now, as to whether we would just be able to provide it to them, whether we declare war, then you're involving Congress in order to be able to take action against Iran. So there are a lot of things that are going on here. I'm not, saying just that through executive action, the president ought to act and he ought to do so alone. Not suggesting that. There's just a lot of things at play here. And I think as often happens, you just think about your personal life. Sometimes you're dealing with one crisis, and now here comes another one, right? Now here comes another one that you hadn't predicted, hadn't expected, and there it is. And what are you going to do with that? It's like, man, as if I didn't have enough to deal with here. Now I've got this I got to deal with. That's just life. That's just life. And this is, I think, the United States. Are we going to rise to the challenge? Are we going to be able to, to deal with this? And the idea then, and I think some of my callers on the show this morning are absolutely right, that I understand why so many folks are reluctant to see what happened. They don't want to see a replay of Iraq under George W. Bush, where we went into Iraq and then we were there and we occupied Iraq and so on. And then you're there and you're there for quite some period of time. I totally understand why so many Americans are adverse to things like that. I am too. I'm not in favor of anything like that. But I think the reason that I opened by talking about Operation Desert Storm is a great example. What did we see the United States do? The United States had a coalition with other nations, and in Operation Desert Storm, it was go in, it was free Kuwait, and then get out. And that's what the United States did. So I think this country is certainly capable of if it comes, again, I'm not advocating this, is. But if it comes to the United States having to go into Iran and remove the Ayatollah and remove the, his leadership and free the people of Iran and then back out and say, okay, now it's up to you. Now it's up to you. Give the country back to Iranians and get out. The United States has done it before. An Operation Desert Storm would be a great example of that. We did not go into Iraq, and we did, and we could have. We liberated Kuwait, boom. Hit Iraq hard, but George H.W. Bush would not go into Iraq. I think that some degree of discipline is going to be needed here to say, okay, if we do this, how do we do this? And removing the threats and then returning the country to the people. We'll see how it plays out. That does not mean that I am advocating, man, we got to go in and we got to, I'm not advocating that. I know some are, but I also recognize the threat. And I'm telling you, in my lifetime, ever since the Shah of Iran fled the country, there has been absolutely nothing but chaos coming out of Iran ever since. Absolutely nothing but chaos. And what makes anybody think that's going to change? As long as they remain in power. It won't. It won't. And again, Iran becoming a nuclear power, the president has made it very, very clear. Go to whitehouse.gov. Take a look at his comments. He has said repeatedly over the course of the last year and longer, Iran cannot be allowed to have nuclear weapons. They simply cannot be allowed, and they are pursuing it like crazy. I mean, and what Israel has said is they're this close. They are this close. And they're doing it not only to protect themselves. Benjamin Netanyahu has said they're doing it to protect the rest of the world and America as well. America, who has been an incredible ally of Israel's. Let's leave it there for today. That's a wrap from the bunker. You made it to the end of the video, so you, my friend, are part of my gallery of champions. A big thank you. Special thanks to the Bunker Brigade, those who are here each and every day. You see their comments, whether on Facebook or on YouTube, especially on YouTube. A lot of you on YouTube. I appreciate hearing from all of you. Thanks so much for being here. If you do me an additional favor and hit that like button before you leave, I'd be even more deeply indebted to you. We'll leave it there for today. You take care. So long until tomorrow, my friend. Until then, I'm underground and gone.